Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast, where we explore healthy masculinity and how it plays out in life. And today I'm talking to my brother from another mother, Yossi Ghinsberg. So Yossi and I met back in 2007. We were both keynoting on separate days for a Nikan conference in Sydney. And I'd heard a lot about him. And I went and sat in on his session. I just couldn't believe this man up on stage, and what a beautiful heart and what an incredible story. And I thought, I have to meet him. So I went out the back and he went off the stage and came around the side, and I walked up to him and said, "We need to talk." And he said, "Well, let's have coffee." And we went and we sat for 3 hours and had coffee. So welcome to my podcast, Yossi Ghinsberg.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for making me welcome here. And I want to say that we are brothers from the same mother, because our true mother is Mother Earth.
Yeah, very
so
true.
So we can say we're brothers from the same mother.
Sounds like a good plan to me. I like that very much. Well, we last caught up in 2022, in November 2022. I was over in Tel Aviv for the Global Wellness Summit, and I went up to visit you at your home in Khazaria, and we spent the day walking, talking. How's the fire pit going in the stone circle? Is that all?
Well, that's my TV.
Ah.
That's how I watch TV.
That's amazing. I mean, this beautiful spot out the back of Yossi's home, and he's got all these amazing stones, and quite incredible. But wow, what a 12 months after that. And how are you doing?
Look, like I'm well, I'm centered, and I'm resilient, and I learned also to even dare to enjoy my life. But I'm traumatized, and I say that for the first time in my life. After all my jungle experience, survival against all odds, I never had a trauma.
Yeah, wow.
I never suffered a trauma. But now I'm traumatized. I'm deeply traumatized, and it took a lot of time. Like I couldn't say. If somebody asked me, "How are you?" I couldn't say, "Okay," because it's not okay.
Yeah.
And the simple things. Like we were shocked and traumatized and hurt deeply. And we still are, but the tremendous, force of life, somehow you get to live as well. And even though the crisis is not over, somehow you cannot live that intensity all the time. So it mellowed a bit, even though the situation is still absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. I often think about it, people in Australia have got really strong opinions about it, and people who've never been to the Middle East. And I know that when I was over there, I took some time to move around by myself and talk with a lot of people and get some understanding of life over there. And then you hear people who've got really, really strong opinions, and I feel that some of those opinions are misguided.
Yeah.
But I also realise that we have no reference point to have empathy for the people of Israel, because we've never been through that.
Yeah.
Like, we've never been in a position where we're living on the edge of war and conflict.
Yeah.
And then to have something as terrible as that happen, I mean, and then the men in the community have got to stand up and show up, and they must carry so much anger and rage. I mean, how do they deal with that?
First of all, this is like something that our life depends on it, and our life depends on young people, on people that are 18 to 21 years old.
Yeah.
Our life depends on our kids.
Yeah.
My daughter is 21.
Wow.
She just was released from the service herself just about 2 months ago.
Wow.
And all her peers, all her friends, they're the people that are in the frontier. So when you think about the army and the Israeli, the IDF, those are just kids. Our mandatory military service is 18 to 21. These are the 3 years. They're kids fresh out of high school. Wow. And these kids particularly, like the older generation was looking down at them. Oh, it's the TikTok generation, or there's the Instush generation. But they're lions. They're like on the front lines. They're risking their life. Each one of them is a hero, and they're saving life. So I know the perception from far away, and the tendency to see the suffering of the underdog and to side with the underdog. I can understand that. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But people don't understand the complexity, and they don't understand what's really going on.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, I can say what's really going on. Hamas and Hezbollah cannot be dealt with. They don't want to be dealt with. They don't want peace negotiation. They don't want coexistence. They are declared, declaring clearly in their manifestos of existences, their purpose is to destroy Israel, conquer back Jerusalem, and get the Jews out of the country. From the river to the sea means to throw the Jews out of Israel. Okay, so when you talk about the Palestinian issue, you cannot have a Palestinian issue when there is no dialogue. And Gaza was evacuated in, I think, 95 was, like when Sharon pulled out, if I'm not mistaken. No, maybe it was 2005. But since then, all they do is build up tunnels and accumulate weapons, and they have only one goal, which basically is to destroy Israel. They've been shooting missiles like for years on settlements, targeting, schools and kindergartens and stuff like that. People live with trauma constantly on the border, live in shelters, etc. In the north, we have the same situation with fanatics called Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah doesn't want to find a way to coexist with Israel. They want to destroy Israel, and they get the finances from Iran. And they have hundreds of thousands of missiles that can arrive to any point. So we live on two, in the south we have Hamas, in the north we have Hezbollah, declared and ready to destroy, and we have to live on our sword. But still, we didn't expect October 7. We didn't expect that level of atrocity and hate. Not that I agree with the government, my government, not that I agree with the way they retaliated. I think there's a different way, but I'm just a person. And I can tell you, I do not agree with the government. I'm not politically aligned with the government, but I understand the circumstances just as somebody that lives in Israel. And people don't understand that. People think that Israel is the oppressor. Israel would wish not to oppress if it had a choice to have these people live free and enjoy the freedom and deal with life and send the school to the kids to be educated. But if you see how they educate the kids from kindergarten, they educate them to be shaheeds, to die for the cause, and the cause is to destroy Israel. So people don't get it. So when they see, the suffering of the Palestinian people, they don't see that Hamas never built infrastructure for the Palestinian people, never built even shelters for the Palestinian people, only tunnels to attack Israel. And they, on purpose, entrenched within the civilians because they want to see the massive retaliations. They want to see the casualty because they win with the populism and these images create a terrible image for Israel as atrocities of war. It's much more complex. I think it's a terrible thing for humanity, not only for Israel, these circumstances.
Well, I remember back when I was 21, the Falklands War erupted, and and there was lots of perspectives around that because the Falkland Islands was English territory, but it was just off the coast of Argentina. And this insane war started to erupt, and I started to get really anxious because I was 21, fit, I was a volunteer surf lifesaver and a professional lifeguard. And I thought, if they start conscription, I'm going to be first in line. And I had terrible anxiety over that and the fear that I'm going to have to go off and fight in some war.
For the Queen.
Yeah, right. But then I look at that and I think, how did I react to that? Was it with courage? No, it wasn't. It was with anxiety. And I don't know how I would have responded, but I think about what you're trying to deal with as a 60-something-year-old man who's got young kids who are having to go and fight in war, and what they're faced with, and what that does for the mums and dads in Israel, but also what it does to those young people if they go and they fight and they see live action and real bullets, even if they don't get injured, how do they reclaim their life when they come back out? I mean,
some are resilient, a lot go into post-trauma and have to deal with it for the rest of their life. The cycles of traumas, everybody is affected, and God, what they see there. And look, I think if we take it one level up and we look at humanity, we are very primitive people. Our technology evolves, but we don't evolve at all. As humanity, we don't evolve. In many, many ways. War is one of them. War doesn't make sense. Resolutions shouldn't be dependent on one prime minister or another. It should be, like this planet should be better managed. The sovereignty of nations is not a good idea. Amazon is burning. The president of Brazil said, it's my land, don't interfere. This is Brazilian sovereign. No, the Amazon belongs to the planet. And the planet is our planet. Same with the oil, same, we behave here, and based on the illusion of separation, we're not separated. It's one little planet, we are. All this planet is ecosystem, humanity and the rest of life on this planet as codependency. And every kid in first grade can understand it. It's not difficult to understand. And we behave in a total different ways that doesn't make sense. So wars probably serve some interest of somebody, and it's all just very, very sad state of humanity. But if we keep on talking, you will see that actually I'm optimistic. I'm very sad about the situation. But like every generation before me, I think that we have a tendency to be messianic and believe that the apocalypse will come in our lifetime. So I do believe in that.
It's so interesting what you said before, because, you look at Ukraine, and really the male population of that country is being wiped out as we speak. So where does it leave that country? And what is even the purpose of that war? People get all uptight about it, but it seems it's so complex and there's so much politics. And it takes me back to contemplating what, my great mentor, Harry Palmer, used to talk about power and what happens when you give people power and they don't know how to handle it. And, a simple example I use is that you might have a group of 5 people who are working in a team, and they might have worked in that team for 10 years and they're doing very, very well, and a new CEO comes in and says, make one of those guys a supervisor. And you appoint one person as supervisor, and within weeks or months, the team has been destroyed because that person who's made supervisor doesn't know how to handle power. And we see that with politicians all the time, and with leaders of things like Hamas, but even leaders of governments, And I'm wondering, as a man, I'm 64 now, and you're in your 60s, and we're sort of stepping into that realm of the elders of society. How do we wake up our contemporaries to hold our governments more accountable to better ideals, so that we do stop the wars and start creating peace?
Yeah, it's frustrating because there's not much that we can do. Some individual rise and stand against entire industries. Some individual rise and create organizations that make a huge difference in the world. But generally, the system is stronger, and the system has its own agenda. When you see the circumstances now in the United States, and you see the leadership of, the greatest democracy, the leaders of the Western world, and you see how sad it is to see what. So when you talk about leadership, and there's not lack of brilliant people that are good people, but somehow politics is a corrupted environment, and people that get into politics, part of it's the games. They have to compromise their integrity just to succeed as politicians. So there's a trap there. If we go back to Plato, the politicians were the noblest. They were like the priests. They were like pure people.
Yeah.
And so these ideals, and I think that we lost a lot because of wrong values as we grow up as societies. So the wrong values that are, basically we live by in general, have led to such circumstances. And by wrong value, I mean there's certain flaws in the systems that I see. One is poverty. We live on an abundant planet, but most people hardly make ends meet.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's very, very wrong. And a lot of people are very, very rich, and a lot of people are very, very poor. Now, for me, that's a problem, not because the people are rich, because the people are poor.
Yeah.
And so looking at that, you think, okay, so what will happen if people will not be poor anymore? Like if all the people will not be poor, what will happen to the rich people? So I want to ask you, sorry, you're interviewing me, but I want to ask you this question. If there'll be no more poverty and all the poor people will be middle class or richer, what do you think will happen to the rich people?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think that because I get a sense that some of the people who are extremely wealthy, money's not their goal. It's superiority. And if you have a planet where everyone's really well educated and they've got access to resources so they can create a life for themselves and move out of fear and start to, create some level of ability to exist. But exist with their needs being easily met, and then they can create from there. Right. Then I think what happens is that the people who have created wealth from the way that it's being created right now, I think a lot of it's being created by opportunism and I think there's a lot of insider trading and that sort of thing. They won't be able to do that so easily. And I think that maybe there'll be more of a levelling, but I don't know. Because the socialist ideal is to level the playing field, but that's never worked, Yeah,
well, I have a different theory, and it's not only my personal theory. I saw a lot of discussion about it. So I believe that when the poor people will not be poor, so the poor will be middle class, and the middle class will be rich, and the rich people will be much richer. So that's the irony of it. The rich people will get richer because the poor people will have money to spend. Right now, the poor people are the problems. They create, crime and drug abuse, and the jails are full of, and the social systems and the hospitals, and poverty creates cycles of agony, and it creates also extremists. But actually, there's no lack of money. So if the poor will have money, they'll spend it. Yeah. By spending it, the economy will get better.
You bet.
Nobody is losing anything by eliminating poverty. So this is one of the biggest wrong concepts that we live by. We live by a concept of scarcity.
Yeah.
A concept of scarcity is an old concept that has an economic logic. The economic logic is scarcity is based on an equation. The equation is called the Malthusian equation. Yeah. The Malthusian equation basically says population grows exponentially while resources are finite. So when you have population growing and the resources don't grow, there's come a point where you exhaust your resources and the resources are not enough to support the population. That means there's not enough for everybody. Yeah. When there is not enough for everybody, that's a very dangerous idea, because if there's not enough for me and you, what it means is I have to kill you because I need to feed my family and I love you, but I need to feed my family first. It brings a brother against a brother, because the idea of there's not enough is a very dangerous idea.
Yeah.
So it's the wrong idea we live by. We live in an idea of scarcity. The destruction that we see in the world is because people are in a hurry for the plunder, for the you know, like they have to take before somebody else is take, because it's competition. We compete over resources. Competition is war.
Yeah.
Competition is war, you know, and competition should not be war, because in war you have losers. Now, that's another concept that we don't understand. In the ecosystem, there's codependency. Okay, that's what ecosystem means.
Yeah.
Ecosystem means that all parts of the ecosystem are codependent.
Yeah.
So you cannot have losers.
Yeah.
Because you will lose. Because if there's codependency and somebody loses, everybody is losers, because we're codependent. So all the whole idea of competition, win and lose, is the wrong idea.
Yeah.
Ideas that doesn't work, because we are an ecosystem. You cannot afford having any loser.
Yeah.
The only way you can compete is if everybody wins in the competition.
Yeah.
It's possible to that everybody wins in a competition.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Well, it's so interesting, because that brings me back to some of the things that I've been talking about in the corporate arena. That if you want to be happy, do everything you can to help other people to be happy, you know, because your actions will leave you feeling really good about who you are. You can't be happy by defeating other people and trying to be the best, because there's going to be an emptiness there that you can't fill, you know. Money can't feed your soul. A nice car can't feed your soul. All those things do is embellish your ego. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an ego, but I feel that, you know, when you talk about the ecosystem, it's like, well, you know, this background picture, you know, we've got the, now, what is that? Mashkapuro people from, they're on the border of Peru and Brazil in the Amazon jungle.
Yeah.
And you were telling me earlier about, well, you tell my listeners about what's happening over there. It's amazing.
Well, as you know, John, the Amazon is part of my life, and I spent years in the Amazon, and I lived deep in remote places in the Amazon, and I lived for 3 years with indigenous people, and I actually, in these years, I became indigenous. And that's another thing that I want to say to your listeners. You know, with all due respect, and I have lots of respect for indigenous people and for Aboriginal people, basically just a synonymous, or native, indigenous, Aborigines means the same. But I want also to protest, you know, because if they are indigenous people and they are Aboriginal people, and if they are natives, who am I?
Yeah.
Am I an alien? Where am I from? I'm also Aboriginal. I'm also indigenous. So first of all, you know, when we have to realize we're all indigenous people. We are from this planet. Where are we from? We are children of this planet, all of us. Okay, so just to say that. But I lived in the Amazon with the natives and became one of them. And I saw, you know, it's very rare to find a tribe like the Machu Picchu, because they still live untouched by society.
Wow.
And that are, you know, those are the most beautiful, most peaceful, and the most in-tune people, because these people know innately that they're nature, they're part of nature, they're part of the cycle of life. You know, like indigenous people never destroy their own environment. They take, it's paradise basically. You take, but you know, like without refrigerator, you don't keep for the next day. Yes, you can dry, you can, and you know, but usually, you know, you have a big fish, you don't have a fridge, you go to your neighbor and you share it with your neighbor, you know. So there's that innocence of living in the nature before we are introduced to culture. Culture gave us different ideas. Culture gave us a very dangerous idea. Culture gave us an idea that we are not nature.
Yeah.
That's the main idea of culture.
Yeah.
Because if you look at culture, it came with myth.
Mm.
And what's the myth of all myths is Genesis.
Mm.
Okay, that's like the biggest myth in the Western world, at least, is the Genesis. Okay, so Genesis is the story of the creation. Okay, God creates the world, and God creates the world in 7 days.
Yeah.
Okay, and God is very happy with His work. He separates the planets from other planets, and He dries the water from the land, and He arranges the stars around the earth. And then he creates all the flora and all the fauna on the earth, and all this takes like 5 days, and God has created a beautiful world. And God is very happy with that. But then He said, no, one thing is missing. I'll create man. But when God creates man, He has a different idea. When He created the flora and the fauna, He created something, He created nature. But when He creates man, He doesn't create nature. It's not just another animal. Mm-hmm. It duplicates Himself, or itself, or themselves, whatever you want to refer to God. But actually Scripture said something very clearly. They say, let's create men in our image and our liking. Yeah. So basically culture gives us a concept of superiority. Yeah. We are not just the rest of the animals. God created us specially in His own image and His own liking. And that's a very dangerous idea, because what it makes us alien. Yeah. We're not children of this planet. God created us. As opposed to all the animals that they are just nature, we are demigods. Yeah. And as demigods, we don't belong here. It's not our house, it's a resource. Yeah. And we use this planet as a resource. Something that the people, those untouched people, they haven't met a missionary yet. Right. Okay? So they're not tainted, they're not, they're still pure. And this tribe now is losing it. This is a week old, this photo. Wow. Wow. Yeah, this tribe is losing its homeland. These pure people are, like loggers came into their living lands, and they pushed them out, and they're displaced, and it's a huge tragedy. Now, what are the loggers going to do? So now we don't have indigenous peoples there. They're going to be just poor people, and displaced and lost and drunk and whatever comes with being introduced to society. They won't be naked anymore because it's immoral, etc. But what would the loggers do? So the loggers will make profit, but that's an illusion, that's not true. Mm-hmm. Because the loggers, let's say there's lots of mahogany in this forest on the border of Peru and Brazil. Let's say there's a lot of mahogany. Now, I know how they work, I've seen that. So first of all, what they do, they usually hire indigenous people, the logging company. They hire indigenous company and pay them money to run into the forest and mark all the mahoganies for them. Right. Then they come in and make trails to get to the mahogany. So now you need tractors and bulldozers. And now they come with machinery and they log down the mahogany. Now they'll have to pull the mahogany out of the forest. Now the mahogany takes it like 30 years to grow. It's not like a fast grower. Yeah. Now the mahogany is a huge tree, but people don't know interesting fact, life in the Amazon is mostly inside the trees. It's in the canopy. Yeah. Most of life is in the canopy. So when you take a tree down, it's all like, thousands and thousands of species are affected. And remember also the codependency. The disaster is not the tree, is much more than the tree. But let's say this tree made profit, so it's worthwhile for this company, and they pull the tree and then they throw it in the river, or they get trucks. Several things happen. First of all, this forest is not virgin anymore. There's a trail. With the trail, the next wave will come, agriculture will come and destroy the entire forest. Now, agriculture makes money, and logging makes money, so you think, okay, well, that's progress, Mm-hmm. It's not. because now the forest is destroyed. When the forest is destroyed, the forest will stop producing.
Yeah.
Because it's hurt, it's injured. Now, if you keep the forest alive, it will produce much more money.
Yeah.
So I'm not romanticizing.
No,
I'm just
I get
telling you
it.
there's more economic value in a living forest, because in a living forest, you have the future medicine of future generation. You have the, you know, like if 0.1% of oxygen less, you know, our life depends on this oxygen. You know, it's very fragile, the ratio of oxygen in the air that we breathe. You know, we're playing with, you know, destruction of our planet. We're playing with a resource which is a major component in the health of the entire planet for a short-term profit, short-sighted profit, and for sovereignty. Who gave the right to the Logos company? Well, this is Peruvian government. They have sovereignty. What sovereignty? This is a planetary resource that all of us so you see, we're not evolved enough.
I think
we don't take care. When we make things that they make no sense from any angle.
No, we often refer to the Amazon as the lungs of the planet. But isn't it interesting that in the last few years, since everything's become about carbon, you know, and I'm not I haven't adopted the whole carbon thing. I'm a first one to stand up and say we have to care for the planet. Yeah. But when we realise that carbon is about 1/25 of 1% of the atmosphere, and that, which is about 40 parts per million. It was like 3,000 parts per million when dinosaurs roamed the earth. When carbon levels are higher, plant life thrives. And since 1980, with a slight rise in carbon, the earth has become about 15% greener because the edges of, you know, deserts and those sorts of areas are getting greener. But it wasn't that long ago that everybody's focus when it came to the environment was the health and the care of the Amazon. But since we've jumped across to this whole thing of renewables, everyone's forgotten about the Amazon. And I find that abhorrent, because there is so much to this, and you're right about these delicate, incredible ecosystems that can teach us so much about life, not just human life, but life. But you know, this domination, this arrogance that it's ours, we can use it, we're superior. Yeah. And it's like that thing about even, you know, when we're looking at how people conduct themselves and how I've conducted myself in the past, where we walk around feeling like we're entitled to do things or to act in certain ways or take things, but there's no humility, and with no humility, there's no respect and there's no reverence. So we, instead of consecrating something like the Amazon, we desecrate it. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And I don't know, where do we go with that?
You know, like, I'm pessimistic and optimistic at the same time. So I'll just tell you, I'm pessimistic because I do not believe that we can do anything to change and save ourselves. That's my pessimism. Humanity cannot help itself. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. They sent us the biggest teachers over the generation and it didn't help us. Okay? They send us Buddhas, they send us Krishnas, they send us Jesus and Moses, they send us Muhammad, they send us huge teachers. Yeah. We haven't awakened. So you cannot say, how would we awaken? Well, they sent the biggest teacher possible and we still didn't awaken. Situation becomes just worse and worse.
Well, we use it as, we use our preferred teaching to decorate us, to give us more superiority,
yeah, or to give us the rationale for, in their name we can kill each other, and, you know, because our God is better than yours, even it's the same God. So, you know, like, no, my God came later and told me something else, and that's why it's better than the same God, because he told you something, it's dated. That's, for example, the Muslims, they say, you know, like, it's the same God of they never claim it's a different God. Yeah. Allah is the same God of the Messianics, which are the Christians, and of the Israelites. There's no question about it. Muhammad speaks about it clearly. But he came to Muhammad last.
Yeah.
That's why Muhammad knows better than Jesus and Moses, because God came to him last.
Yeah.
And for that they have the right to basically Islam is very missionary. It conquered the entire world and turned Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are have nothing to do with Arabia.
Yeah.
It's just so. My pessimism is realistic. I'm a realistic pessimist.
Yeah.
But I'm also realistic optimist.
Mm-hmm.
And my optimism doesn't rely on humanity. That's why I'm optimist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think humanity can save itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they can, or we can. We can't, because we will not save ourselves. There's the slight chance that we save ourselves, and we're too late in saving the planet, but we may save ourselves. So also, I doubt all the environmental movements. I doubt their reasons, because I think in the basic of it is we're not really trying to save the planet.
Yeah.
We're just trying to save ourselves.
Yeah.
It's too hot for our own ass, so we have to fix the planet for us. It's still the superiority.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what I believe can happen, which is a bit different way of looking at it. I believe that we will evolve. So when I say we as humanity cannot help ourselves, but we will not be humanity. We will be altered humanity because of the evolution.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that, we are Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Right? I believe that in the next, that's a bold declaration, decade, we will not be Homo sapiens anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next species that is coming very soon, this is very fortunate because this happens once in millions and eons, that actually a stage in evolution is achieved. I believe, John, that you and I will not be Homo sapiens. And I believe that that species that we will become within 10 years will be much more evolved than us. And that's my hope, that they can fix it.
Yeah.
And they will be us. In 10 years, we will be them, because we are in that stage of humanity when we are about to transcend from Homo sapiens and become something else. And this is going to happen very soon. And I trust in that, because I believe that there's simple things that we cannot do. For example, the first things that I would do as a almost digitus, let's call that as a temporary name for the next species, I would advocate for the United States of Earth.
Yeah.
And cancel nationalities, just like the United States, or, there's still cultures in Louisiana is different from, Montana, and, very different cultures, but it's the United States of
Missouri,
America. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm talking about the United States of Earth, and that's the first thing that we need to do. We cannot keep on treating this planet as 200 different entities.
Yeah.
It's wrong. We can maintain our cultures, we can maintain our beauty, but this planet has to be managed in a responsible, careful, and enlightened way. And I believe that it will happen. I'm optimistic.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that. My optimism is that humanity is always evolving. It's never a straight line, and it's often clumsy, and sometimes it can look really bad, but I do feel like we're evolving. And then you look at a city like Melbourne, 5 million people, and we've got so many different cultures here, and we live very well together. Our crime rate is pretty good, and you're right about the poverty. If we lift some people out of poverty, a lot of that crime will disappear. So I agree with you, and like you, I'm a traveller and been to many places and can fit in really easily, because at the end of the day, we're all just people, right? But I think that there's the challenge of the human spirit and its constant battle to gain ascendancy over the human mind. And that's a big part of it. And I don't think we teach people how to manage their mind. And so we look at what's going on in politics in America, for example, where it got to the point of absolute craziness. And I sort of stumbled across a different perspective about what happened on the weekend with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Maybe that young guy was some sort of angel who just came in and thought, we need to do something drastic here to make everybody wake up, you know. I won't kill him, but I'll shoot his ear off. And the ear is very symbolic of listen, you know. And I thought, well, that's another perspective, because the whole of America sort of pulled their head in this last week, you know. So I'm with you on that one, and I think that the whole nationalism thing it gets pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. It's not. I mean, I'm all for culture, but nationalism is all about separation. And culture we can be united with different culture, but with different nationalities.
Yeah,
is very different. These times we are about to enter a new era, and that's my hope. We're about to enter a new era. It's very, very close in terms of technology is coming to a point where it will affect our life in much bigger way, much bigger way. And basically, it's unavoidable. That's one thing that is unavoidable is the development of technology. No matter all the wars and the floods and the plagues, technology still obeys certain rules of duplication, like compounding, you know. It just doubles itself. It doesn't grow linearly, it doubles itself. Now, as every time it doubles itself, the mass is, so increasing, and now the mass is so massive, so every such double, it's massive effect. The next few compounding steps are going to throw us into a totally different era, and we should be prepared for that. It can create some chaos initially. I know there's a lot of fear, and for the right reasons. There's going to be massive wave of unemployment.
Yeah.
Across the planet, because the intelligence of our machines already reached, but it will be much more sophisticated that it can replace. I mean, the machines are smarter than us already, but they're not as complex as us, so they cannot understand subtleties and social circumstances, so they cannot replace us. They can solve problems for us much better. Mathematics, nobody is smarter than a calculator.
Yes, right,
So it's a long time ago that the machine is smarter than us. But we have advantages, because we're very complex. When the machine will get that complexity, it will be able to replace us. We're not far from that moment. And when we are replaced by the machine, that's a very good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because, we're here to fulfill ourselves. We're here to find what we have to give. What's our uniqueness? For our true nature is like to find our gift and to give it.
Yeah.
We all want that. This is how we, as you said, for us to feel happy is to contribute, to give. That's what makes somebody the happiest.
Yeah.
Meaning, to be meaningful, to live a life that matters, to live we're all saying the same thing. Innately we are noble.
Yeah.
But the circumstances of our life is like difficulties and issues and a lot of financial stress. So people, instead of fulfilling themselves, they just hardly make a living.
Yeah.
I know in Australia people don't feel it so much, but most of the world is in poverty, and people work really hard and they're in debt.
Yeah.
And this cycle is, creating a lot of stress, and the stress creates a lot of, disease that spreads in different ways. So what happens is that our purpose became to make a living. That became our purpose.
Yeah.
We cannot look for a higher purpose. The moment we will be replaced. So it's not that we will be forced to stop our work. For example, in 10 years, there'll be no drivers.
Yeah.
Nobody will drive. Driving will be like riding a horse. It's going to be a sport.
Yeah.
and it will be a special places where you go and drive a car. It's going to be a sport. But there are not going to be any drivers. I'm
going to have to buy a membership because I like driving. Eh?
Me too. And get a nice old car and play with it. It's going to be a hobby.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to drive. Okay, so you think hundreds of millions of professional drivers on the planet are going to be unemployed. And that's just one example, but entire industries are going to, we're going to be replaced because the machine will be so sensitive and so smart. It's smarter already, but it will be so sensitive in other ways that it could actually replace us in our job. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because we will not have to dedicate our life to make a living. We'll be able to rise and see what's our true purpose. To fulfill ourselves, and money will not be a problem because the machines are going to be much better at making money than us. So I'm very optimistic. For me, the Messiah is coming, and the Messiah is technology.
Yeah.
Well,
it's very interesting. I was thinking while you were talking, there's a couple of things. Back in about in May 2016, my beautiful older sister, who's a very smart woman and courageous and an incredible glass ceiling breaker. Like the areas that she went professionally, she led a path for a lot of young women now. And she suffered a stroke, and it was a debilitating stroke, and she was in hospital for 6 months. And really, if she hadn't have been in a room where she was actually doing her first aid requalification, there was 2 paramedics in the room. If she hadn't have been in that room, she may not have survived that stroke. But anyway, she came out of it and she lost all governance over her speech. So if she thought that your shirt that you're wearing didn't look good, she'd just tell you, like just complete honesty. Whatever she was thinking, it just came out, and it was often very brutal. But she lost the ability to lie. She just lost that ability to lie, And I feel like that's one of the things about AI. It won't be able to tell a lie. It's always, how do you program it to tell a lie, like you talk to Siri, you can't get Siri to tell you a lie. Siri's just going to give you the facts. So I think that it's probably going to be harder and harder and harder for people to operate from a dishonest place. I'm not sure whether I'm fully aligned with you about industry, because I'm wondering what new industries AI might create. Who knows? Well, for example, the parks where you go to drive a car, right? But the whole thing is interesting, but I agree that at some level humanity is somehow collaborating to create its own awakening, to force us into that level of,
No, this is happening, and it's real, and it's coming soon, and everybody should be prepared, and it's a good thing. People should stop being afraid of it.
Yeah.
That it's going to take over. It's not going to take over. It's going to just enhance our abilities to deal with things in a much, much better way.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that and prepare myself to that. But still, we want still to be, it doesn't mean that we have to get away from nature. It doesn't mean that, like I love, you've been to my house. You see, I have a house, but I don't live in it.
Yeah, I know.
I live outside.
Yeah, I love that, yeah.
Because I prefer to live in a tent than in a room, so I live outside in a tent. I love to live in the element. Now, as you see, my tent is beautiful and comfortable, but it's still a piece of fabric.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not, there's no blocks, there's no cement.
No.
It's just a frame and beautiful fabrics hanging on it. And I sleep there all year. Yeah. Winter, summer, and I've been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
And I live outside. So simplicity, technology and simplicity, they don't have to contradict each other. You can still have the simple life, you can still be connected to the earth.
Yeah.
But, our state of mind has to improve, and our tolerance for each other. And the moment there'll be abundance, there'll be more tolerance. People that are, they live in abundance, they're not extremists. Extremism comes from poverty and less crime, and so we were never thrown out of Eden. That's the second, there's 2 problems with Genesis. One is the idea that we are not an animal, that we are a demigod. And the second problem that I see with Genesis is the concept of scarcity. It's there in Genesis chapter B, when Adam and Eve, they, made this terrible sin of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Then God got really upset.
Yeah.
And I'm just holding on to the superficial, just to the literate part of the story. God is so upset and tells Adam, as he throws him out of Eden, that from this moment on, in the sweat of your brow, you will eat your bread.
Yeah.
Basically, he curses him with scarcity, because he came from Eden, where you needed no sweat. Just you were in Eden, you just such abundance, just take and enjoy. You still have to work for it, you still have to pick it, you still have to hunt it. Nobody is like serving you to your hammock.
Yeah.
But you live in an abundant environment where there's everything. We still live in this environment. And just the concept of being thrown out of Eden, we believe the concept that we are not an animal, that we are godlike, and we believe the concept that we have sinned and we're cursed, and that we have to live in scarcity. So some fundamental paradigms, they need to be re-engineered.
I think it still runs, because I think nowadays when people sin, where they do the wrong thing and they know they've done the wrong thing and they've done it from opportunism or whatever, then they can't enjoy their bread, They're going to be sweating while they eat, and they can't enjoy the wealth that they've created. I think that's part of the challenge of human beings. And one of the things I've learned recently, young men who have attempted suicide, there's a really decent survey, is that the reason that these young men were contemplating suicide is because their idea of themselves was that they're a worthless, useless piece of shit, And so when you're in that realm where everything's competitive, and I think a lot of young men, they feel that because they don't want to play that game, because they don't want to be dishonest. There's part of them that wants to find a way to live an honourable existence, and we're not supporting them with that. I think there's so much we can do. I'm interested, a quick question about you sleeping outside. I was jealous when I saw that beautiful tent and where you sleep, because I love the outdoors and I like it, out there in the natural breeze and that sort of thing. When you, after your jungle experience, and I know we're not going to talk about that, and anybody who does want to learn about Yossi's jungle experience, what's the movie called? Jungle, is it? Yeah, Daniel Radcliffe, 2017, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so it's a great story. What this man survived is incredible, but out of gratitude, I think, and a sense of service, you helped the people, the Indians in the mountains there, to turn their villages into ecotourism villages, to support it. So did your love of sleeping outside come from that experience?
No, much earlier. I was stationed in the Sinai Desert when I was 18. Okay, I was drafted to the Navy, and I was based I was assigned to a missile boat in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the Sinai.
Right, wow.
And these were the 3 last years of Israeli possession of the Sinai. And the peace accord was already signed. So in 3 years, Sinai returned to Egypt, which made it a very quiet, there was no tension, in terms of like patrolling or that. It was in a stage of transition from Israel to Egypt. So it was very peaceful, and we had a lot of free time. They didn't know what to do with us. So in the free time, I would enter the desert and started befriending the Bedouins. And the Bedouins at that time, it was like really like tribal. And there was no tourism, nothing. They just lived in the desert, a few tribes of Bedouins. And I fell in love because I was always attracted to the exoticism of tribal, but only through literature. This is the first time that I met any culture. At that time, we weren't at young age, we weren't traveling all over the world as young people now with a family. I grew up in Israel and I never went out of Israel. So to meet a culture that is not Israeli culture was fascinating for me, and they were very different than Israelis. So I was attracted to them, and I spent more and more time with them. Gradually I learned how to speak their language. I started dressing. I was a soldier, but when I was off the base, I would dress in a jalaba and a kafia, like a Bedouin.
Wow.
And I would eat with them, like they eat in one tray, all the men sit and they eat together from the same tray. And they're very quiet people.
Wow.
Israeli are very noisy, like Australians are very noisy. I'm both. I'm Israeli and Australian.
Yeah.
And like you notice, mate, like it's very noisy. Israelis are the same. The Bedouins are very quiet. They speak softly. They whisper.
Wow.
I was fascinated. And part of it is their lifestyle. They live like that. They live either in tents made of camel hair, or by the shores. They make themselves huts from whatever the sea threw out.
Wow.
The most artistic things. No two pieces are the same. They tie them. They hammer them whatever they can, and they have this little simple huts, very charming. And just to sleep outside under the night sky and to feel the breeze. And there's nothing like that gives me more joy and connection. You feel part of the elements. So naturally, I was looking for that. So a few years I was traveling. I was a backpacker. I was sleeping outside. I had a tent. Then I returned and starting living a real life, as in you have a house, you have a wife, kids. You become normal, so to speak. But at the age of 30, I built myself the first tent.
Wow.
Yeah. And I built it in LA on a roof.
Right.
Yeah.
What part of LA?
It was in West Hollywood.
Wow.
Orange and Sunset. This was like on the corner of Orange and Sunset in West Hollywood.
Yeah. Wow.
And in a simple building right there, on the roof, I built myself a Bedouin tent.
Wow.
And people started coming. Even the television came to shoot it because it was so. And from that moment on, I kept on building tents, and each tent has a different atmosphere in it. They're not the same, and sometimes they have a theme. The second tent I built was called a Roman, how do you say, like a leader of I forget the name, but like a, how do you call a leader of the army in the Roman?
The centurion.
Centurion tent.
Right.
Okay?
Wow, yeah.
It was all white columns. I painted the, wood, but I painted it white, so white column. It had red carpet, and it had a structured fireplace in it.
Wow.
And it was very elegant. Then I married a girl named Tal. Her name was Tal. So I decided, and we moved to Tel Aviv. So I built a tent and I called it the Tal Mahal. And I went to India. And I created the most amazing tent.
Wow.
This tent had 16,000 mirrors laced inside the fabrics.
Wow.
So when you put one candle, it had 16,000 reflection, and their reflection was mad, just was one candle.
Wow.
Because the fabrics had inlaid, small mirrors.
Yeah.
I counted 1 meter and then calculated 16,000 mirrors.
Wow.
And it had lush Kashmirian carpets, and this was a penthouse. It became redundant. Nobody spent time in the house. Everybody just came to the tent. When you have a tent, the house is, you just go to the toilet or something in the house. Now I built myself everything outside, shower, toilet, bath, everything is outside.
Yeah,
so I don't have to, and a kitchen. So I don't have to go inside. Yeah. So I love it. Also the romance of living in a tent. There's like a sense of romance, a sense of adventure. Also, it pays tribute for the, like the land and the Aboriginal people, and also very light footprint.
Yeah.
You disassemble it in a day. It's nothing. It's just frame and fabric. But I'm telling you, for me, I just enjoy it. It's not for the declaration. It's not for the tradition. It's just I enjoy it. I love adventure. I love romance, and they go well together. Like.
They do, absolutely. Well, I mean, I get it. I mean, it's very appealing. Like when I was a kid, we lived on a cattle station out in central Queensland, and we used to sleep out on the veranda because there wasn't room inside. We had a big family, and then my parents bought a pub, and I slept out on the veranda there as well and I loved it. I loved the cool, especially the cold air in winter and those sorts of things. So the appeal of sleeping outside is very strong.
Yeah.
Mate, it's been incredible having this conversation, you know, and I think that I'd like to invite all of my listeners to start to get a bit more interested in other areas of the environment rather than just this whole thing of renewables, which we're really cluttering up beautiful land with renewables when we could actually take a bit more of a healthy look at what's happening in places like the Amazon and what we can do to care for that and care for these beautiful Indigenous people who really should be left in peace to continue to live the way they live because they care so much. And I love the work that you're doing. You're a real warrior for those sorts of people, you know. And I'm sure we're going to talk lots more over dinner tonight. But one question I do ask everybody as I'm doing this podcast is, as you're growing up, you know, as young men, as boys, we look and we have this vision of becoming a good man. Who was somebody that touched your heart as you were growing that made you sort of want to perhaps emulate or develop yourself in a certain direction?
They changed over the years, but always, you know, there's people that have been inspiration for me. And as a young man, you know, I don't know if you know, but I was self-educated, you know, how do you call it? Like I went to school, but I was reading books under the table. Like I wasn't listening to the teachers. So my first heroes, I remember, were actually from the Greek, not the mythology, the leaders of the Greek. I read all the writing of Plutarch.
Wow.
And for example, you know, Alexander the Great. And this story, I'll tell you a small story, and you know, like to tell you how much I got inspired by Alexander the Great. So at the age of, I think he's 21, and he's crowned to be the leader of all the Greek armies to set and fight Koresh, the king of Persia. So he's so young, and then he's crowned as the leader of all the armies for all, you know, he's from Macedonia, but Sparta, Athens, all of them behind him. Alexander becomes the leader of all the armies, and he's set to go to war. And in Thebes, which is that city, that's the crowning, and everybody is there in a huge party, and to honor him before he's set for the war. But he's troubled because the smartest man on the planet at the time is considered to be someone called Diogenes. And Diogenes is there in the city, but he didn't come to and he's the smartest of all men. So Alexander is really troubled. So why is Diogenes not here? I want to get the blessing of Diogenes. And somebody is telling him, you know, he was seen thrown in the harbor. He's lying there under a barrel, just, you know, relaxing. So Alexander is so troubled, he's leaving the party, and with his entourage behind him, he goes in search of Diogenes, and he meets Diogenes, and Diogenes is bare naked. He's naked, he's lying there in the sun, enjoying himself. Alexander comes with all his entourage, and the shadow falls on the face of Diogenes. So Diogenes opens his eyes, and he looks at Alexander, and Alexander looks at him, and Alexander says, Diogenes, give me your words. Tell me, you know, like, tell me what you have to tell me. And Diogenes looks at him and said, can you move away from the sun? So people laugh, but Alexander doesn't laugh, so everybody shuts up because he's known for his temper. And Alexander just stands there quietly. And then he leaves, and the entourage leaves behind him. He goes for about 15, 20 meters, he stops, so everybody stops. He ponders for a second and then he say, you know, if I wasn't Alexander, I would wanted to be like Diogenes. I wanted to be Diogenes, but I'm Alexander. And then he went and he conquers Persia and he conquers the rest of the world. So what I want to tell you, other people can be an inspiration for us, but we have to walk our own path.
Yeah.
We have to be our own heroes of our own story.
Yeah.
So we should inspire ourselves to be the best version that we can be. We shouldn't adore people and try to be like them.
Yeah.
We should get inspired by them, but we should be ourselves. Each of us is unique.
So
and
true.
each of us should find our own way and be our own heroes.
So true, isn't it? And it's like really, you know, developing and supporting the younger people coming up to have the courage to discover who they are.
That's
so
right.
they can really, because then we get their best gifts. You know?
That's
like, you know, it's so cool. I mean, that's a beautiful piece of wisdom to finish off with. So, so good, Yossi. I mean, you've got to come back at some point. Maybe I'll come to Israel and we'll do an interview over there.
Look, I thought this was like 15 minutes that we talked. I thought it's going to be a longer podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's 16 minutes actually. But thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Yossi. And as I always say at the end of these podcasts is please try to be that adult that you needed when you were a little kid and you're in trouble or you're frightened. So thanks very much and please share this around. Yossi's got lots of wisdom. Don't keep it to yourself. Take care out there. And I'd also like to thank the team here at Studio B for hosting Yossi Ghinsberg and I in our podcast. They've set the studio up so beautifully for us. They've been so welcoming and they're incredible technicians and they've just made our life really easy today. So thanks, guys.